Hello and welcome to everybody on Cloud Fitness. So in today's video of Python series in continuation, I am here with the tutorial 19. Now in this tutorial, we are going to continue our discussion on how to fetch elements from a string in Python using slicing. So in my previous tutorial 18th video, I have talked about one method of slicing, which is using the slice constructor. In this particular video, I am going to use array slicing. Now again, this is the most widely used thing, so do remember to practice it, do hands-on on your own. So let's move on, and before moving on, I'd like to show you the slide which I also showed in my previous video, that if you have any word, if you have any sentence, anything that you might have, right, in that case, when you do indexing, right, indexing becomes the placeholder for your first element, right? So S is the first element. So when you read it from left to right, it starts with 0, and when you read it from right to left, it starts with -1. So do remember, this is like really important. It is very basic. So let's move on to our PyCharm editor and see how we can do slicing. Now this was something that we discussed in our previous video using the slice constructor. So now let me create a new Python project, a new Python file, and let me say slicing02 and hit enter. So here I am with the new file. Let me copy the string because we can use the same string, and we can see how array slicing works in Python. So this is the same string which I showed you in the example as well, right? Slice constructor we have already used, right? Now let me say I want to fetch few elements from this string, and this is something that we have done in our previous videos as well. So if I say string 01, and in the square brackets, if I simply put 0, right, and let's say I want to print it, right? Now the moment I want to print it and I close this bracket as well and I run this file, you can see S comes up. Why S comes up? Because it says that give me the 0th element, right? The 0th index element. Now 0th index, I've already told you, it is nothing but S, right? Now similarly, if I again want to, let's say, print -1, right? And I have also shown you in this chart over here that which is the 0th element, which is the -1. -1 is G, right? So let me simply run it. You can see G came over here. Now let's say I want to print, let's say, 4th element, right? I'm just randomly putting it as 4th element. Now what is the 4th element? It said it gave me output as N, right? 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. 4 is nothing but N, right? Now similarly, if I want to say give me -4th element, right, and let me simply run it, right? What will be the -4th element? You have to read it from right, right? -1, -2, -3, -4 is nothing but R, right? So this is how this is nothing but, this is array indexing, right? This is nothing but array indexing, where you are only giving it one element. Now let me simply comment this part. Now usually whenever you do this kind of slicing, what happens is you have to actually give 3 parameters to it, just like your slice constructor. In the slice constructor also, I told you that you have to provide these 3 elements, right? Start, stop and increment, right? Now the similar case goes here as well. You have to provide start, you have to provide stop, and you have to provide increment. These 3 things. If you do not provide any of these, it takes in few default values. Now these default values is exactly same as I showed you over here in my previous video as well. So in my previous video also, I showed you that by default it takes in 0 as the start, right? And then by default it takes the length of whatever string that you are trying to do slicing on, that as a stop. And then increment, by default it takes 1. So I hope you understood this, and remember that in slicing it was comma, right? We always used comma, slice constructor, but here in array indexing we use colon, right? So these are the default values, and if you do not provide any of these default values, by default it takes 0 here, length of the string, and then increment is -1. Increment -1, again it is exactly same from my slice constructor. I told you increment 1 means hops, right? So we will see it, no worries. Again I'll talk about this in the same video. So when I said 0 over here, right, what happened here? It by default it takes 0 as the length of the string, right? When I said 0 over here, what happens over here? It by default goes to my string, it just checks the 0th element and prints me out there. But now when I talk about slicing, what will happen? In slicing, I have to, let's say, get a range of elements, right? Now in that case, let me say print, inside print, let me say, let me say string 01, because I want to slice string 01, and inside it, let me put in few values. Now let me say 0 colon colon, right? The moment I do it and I run it, you will see the output is nothing but string. Why did this happen? Because it started from your 0th index, which is nothing but s, and when you did not give anything in middle, what happened? It by default took the length of the string. Length of string means it went till the end of the string, and when you did not give anything over here, it took 1 as the default value, and then what happened? It printed everything. Now 1 here means the hops. So whenever 1 is given, right, it means 0 hops. It is not going to skip any element, right? When you try to give, let's say if I give, let me just to show you, let me put 2 over here, right? By default it has taken 1, right? Now when I run it, you will actually see it says srn, so it skipped one element. So first it printed s, then it skipped t, then it printed r, then it skipped I, then it printed n, then it skipped g, and there was nothing else after that. So when you say 2, it skips one element, but when by default it is 1, what happens is it doesn't skip any element, right? So I hope this part is very clear to you. Let me just comment it out from here, and let me bring it down over here, and let me simply comment this part as well. So now this is how your indexing works, and this is how by default your indexing works in Python. So it will by default take 0 at the first place, length of the string at the second place, and 1 at the increment side. And 1 increment means 0 hops. Nothing is going to it is going to print each and every element. The moment you say 2, it is going to hop 1 element. The moment you say 3, it is going to hop 2 elements, like that. Now let me say print, in fact let me copy it to save time. And now if you say, if you do not want to start from 0, if you want to start from -1, right? Let's say if you want to start from -1, then let's see what happens. And let me do not give anything here, and let us simply run it, right? Now if you see what happens over here, right? Check by default, the moment you gave -1, what happened over here, right? Whenever you do, this is called negative indexing, first thing, right? Whatever you did above was nothing but it was positive indexing. And what you are doing right now, it is called your negative indexing. Now in case of negative indexing, it will start from -1. -1 is nothing but it is G over here, right? It is going to start from G. In this negative indexing, how you can actually understand what will be the output. So if you look here, you got the output as G, right? Now there's a little trick to it. So for example, this is -1, right? Now this -1 is nothing but G. Okay, now what is the positive value for this G, right? So if I go back to this PPT, this G is -1 and the positive value for this G is 5. Now what you can always do is, you can always take it as if whatever input is given over here, -1 is nothing but it is 5. Just think it like this, right? And now if I run it, you can actually see that both prints the same. Now what does it mean? So if you have any negative index over here, what you can do is, you can always replace it to the positive index and then check the output. So for example, if you see 5 over here, so it starts from 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, basically it starts from 0, right? If you read it, so 5th position will be G. So it starts from G, it stops at the length of the string, right? And by default increment is 1, right? Now there is nothing after G, so it is not going to print anything, it is only going to print G. And so both the first and the second one is synonymous. Now how do you do it? So whenever you see any negative indexing value, just replace it with the positive value when you read it from left to right, and you will get your answer right there. So for example, let's say let me print in here -4, right? And let me print here, let's say -6, right? And now let me just comment these parts and let me simply run it. So you can actually see over here it doesn't print anything, right? It doesn't print anything. Why it doesn't print anything? See, there are two ways to do it. One way I already showed you, that in case you have any doubts, just replace it with the positive number, with the corresponding positive number when you read it from left to right, and then give the output. The other way is you start from -4. -4 is what? This is -1, this is -2, n is -2, I is -3, and R is -4, right? You start from -4 and go to -6, right? And you go till -6. And what is -6? This is -4, this is -5, and this is S is -6, right? And you always know that this is nothing but this is the second element, and this is considered as the length of the string or the stop element, and you do not have to take the last element as the into consideration, right? So it starts with R, right? And you are asking it to go to -6, right? With one hop, and then in that case it is not going to print you anything. Now the other way around of doing it, which is the much better way, because with that particular way you are going to understand it in like really well. If you talk about -4 and -6, right? What is the positive number for -4, right? It is 2, right? What is the positive number for -6? It is 0, right? Hold on, if you did not understand, it is little tricky. So -4 and here it is 2, right? 6 is 0. So let me exchange the number, right? 6 is 0, right? 6 is 0. -4 is nothing but, let me just recheck, -4 was nothing but it was 2, right? Now if you run it, it is again not going to, the second row is also not going to print anything. Now if you see, this -4 is nothing but 2, -6 is nothing but 0. What happened here? It started from 2, 0, 1 and 2. It started from R, right? And go till length, right? What it is saying, go till the length of 0, right? So it is not proceeding itself, right? The length is 0 and you cannot proceed ahead, right? The moment you exchange negative indexing with the positive indexing, you are going to get the very clear picture. It started from the second index, but the length is itself 0, so it is not going to print you anything. So whenever you use negative indexing, just try to exchange it. Just try to exchange it with the positive numbers. You are going to get a very clear picture on what the output can be. So this is how you can always do slicing, right? So for example, if I go ahead with the positive slicing, for example, just giving you an example here, let's say I want to start with 2, let's say end with 9, and I want to, let me say, end with 13, and let me say hop of 2, right? So I want you to guess what should be the output for this. It will start from 2, right? 0, 1 and 2. It will start from R, right? It will do a hop of 2. 2 means one element. It will leave one element. So R and N. It will leave I and then it will print N. It will leave G and then there is nothing else to print. So it will give R and N as the output. So this is how your R and N is the output, right? So this is nothing but this is your slicing. This is called your complete slicing. Now similarly, there is another way. Let's say I say I don't, let me not put any elements over here, right? So I told you that by default it takes 0, length and 1 as the input. So if it starts from 0, right, it will by default take 0, length over here. So I discussed this part over here, right? So by default what it will do, by default it is going to take first value as 0, second as the length, and the third as 1, right? So when it says 0, so by default what will happen, it will start from S, right? It will start from S and then it will hop 1. 1 means it is not going to leave any element. Basically 0 skips, right? And then it is going till the end, length, till the whole length, right? And then it is going to, in this case it is going to print the whole string, right, the whole value. Now there is another thing that is called as let me just copy it over here to explain you. Sometimes what happens is a very important question that gets asked as well multiple times in the interviews as well, is that let's say you have the string, right? And if you want to reverse this string, now how do you reverse this string, right? How do you reverse the string? So you have string. Now if you want gnirts, how do you do that? So that part also can be done in multiple ways, right? You can use inbuilt function as reverse. Also you can use this string slicing. So when I say the string slicing, you can simply put in -1 over here and simply run it and see what happens. So you can see that it gets reversed, right? Why did it get reversed? Now what you can do, simply put in, instead of -1, put in the actual positive value for g, which is nothing but 5. So the moment I run it again, what will happen is it is going to give you wrong output. Now this is something that I wanted to bring over here in this particular video. So if you see, if you try to do positive of this negative indexing over here, if you try to do positive of this negative indexing over here, what will happen is you will end up getting wrong result. Why? Because this is the hop. So never try to do positive for a hop. So for example, until you have these places filled. So for example, if I go at the top, so whenever I did positive, right, so from -1 I did 5 here. So I did it for the stop and the start and the stop. So this was start and the middle one was stop. So always do it for start and stop, right? So the moment you do, you change it for this hop, right? And when both these first two places are empty, it is not going to give you right results. So remember that part always, right? So this is something that I wanted to show you. Also, now the reverse part, right? So reverse can be done in 2 ways, using reverse function as I told you, and the second is using this negative indexing. So the moment I say -1, right, what will happen is your whole string will get reversed. It is actually used to reverse your string. It is actually used to reverse your string. So remember that this colon -1, what it actually does is it kind of reverses your string. This helps you in reversing your string, and the same formulation that I've talked about today, this gets applied to the list as well. So I hope you understood this. In case you did not understand it, try watching the video at a little slower pace and try doing it on your own as well, right? So here we have talked about the main thing that you can always do is, so if your start and stop, right, both these values are filled with the negative numbers, if you have negative number over here, you can always go ahead, switch it to the positive ones, and then you can check the output, right? But if you have this increment in the negative and above the first start and stop as null, do not do that. Do not move it to the positive. Do not change it to the positive before to fetch the output, basically, right? So, and when you have negative numbers, that is called negative indexing. When you have positive number, that is called positive indexing. And try it on your own, because that is when you are actually going to learn, because there are 1,000 permutations and combinations for this, right? So you have to be able to do it on your own and understand it in a little more better way. So thank you so much for being till here, and do remember to like, share and subscribe to my channel.